All right, so thank you all for joining us today. My name is Michael Gummel from Paradigm Technology Consulting. Today we are hosting our monthly ISV Spotlight, and with us today we have David Monroe from Paramount WorkPlace, who is going to be walking us through their product and talking about the AP automation or purchasing processes automation, not just the AP side, but also requisitions and purchase orders and so on. So with that, I will go ahead and turn the session over to David. Again, if anyone has questions, please use the chat as we move through here. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Michael. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Dave Monroe, and I will be doing your presentation today. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start with just a few real quick background slides just to give a little bit of background about the Paramount organization and the solution you're going to be seeing here today. Then we're going to be spending the majority of the time actually doing a little bit of a walkthrough and going through various aspects of the application and highlighting some of the potential benefits for each of your organizations. Now, just to get us kicked off here, a little bit of that initial background on the Paramount organization itself. So Paramount is headquartered in Walled Lake, Michigan. That being said, we actually have a number of different individuals that are spread across both Canada and the United States. Myself, I'm actually based here in central New Jersey. We do have over 90,000 users of the solution you're going to see today, and it's called WorkPlace. WorkPlace is the exclusive focus, the only focus of the Paramount organization. Now, WorkPlace is a web-based portal that employees can use to enter and approve and ultimately process a variety of different types of transactions. And I'm going to go into those here in just a moment. But outside of this being a web-based portal, which is really key for any time you're dealing with any sort of a request or an approval mechanism, it needs to be a very accessible type of a solution. A key element here is its integration back into Dynamics GP. This is a direct, a real-time integration, a very thorough integration. It encompasses obviously many different integration points, but more importantly, a variety of all the various add-ons that you can provide to Microsoft Dynamics GP itself from Microsoft itself, ranging from encumbrance management, analytical accounting, PO commitment, and inventory capabilities, but also has integrations with other extensions of the Dynamics GP platform. So if you are already running an add-on that may have been featured in one of the other monthly spotlights, there is a good chance we also will integrate with them, assuming there's crossover in terms of the process. Now, the application, as I mentioned, is called WorkPlace, and within there, we're addressing these four key areas: requisition and procurement, the travel and expense or expense reimbursement, AP invoice automation to facilitate your vendor invoices. And for those of you that are running project accounting, we also have a timesheet dedicated area. It's actually an area that I'm a former customer myself on. Now, you may be looking at all of these and going, wow, this is a lot here. I don't need all of this, or, you know, this seems like a really extensive application that's maybe too much for my particular organization. But WorkPlace itself is actually designed to deploy these solutions individually. But if you are deploying multiple solutions within this group, they will work seamlessly together. So we have a number of customers that are requisition only, or expense only, or invoice only, or time only. We also have many customers that combine these, so maybe it's time and expense, or requisition expense, or requisition and invoice automation. What is key here is the focus. These four areas represent four common areas where employees of an organization either initiate or need to approve a transaction that will ultimately end up in Dynamics GP. That is our focus. That is why we cover these areas. That is the common element. Now, another key element in each of these areas is the fact that we have taken a best-of-breed approach to them. So when you get into the requisition area, there's a number of components or features and functionality that are specific to the requisition process, and we're going to look at some of those. When you get into the expense reports, once again, different features and functionality that are expense-specific, things that you would expect in any best-of-breed application, but has full integration, real-time integration, certified integration back to Dynamics GP, and that's something that we've been doing for 13 years now with the Dynamics GP platform. So for the presentation today, we're actually going to look at each of these in turn. For those of you that may be interested in one area more than the other, hopefully we do get to address those, but if we do not get an opportunity to go into the level of detail you are looking for in a particular area, please reach out and let Paradigm know afterwards, and we can schedule a more one-on-one type of demonstration. Now, for the demonstration itself, I am going to focus on the requisition component here a little bit more, and just use that as a sample element. So we'll look at approvals and things along those lines, and then we'll move into the other areas. Now, last thing I want to point out just before we move to the application itself is in two of the areas, the expense reports and the project time, we have an extended interface with a mobile app. This app is designed for the iPhone, for the Droid phone. You can run on the BlackBerry using the Google emulator. And this actually extends that web application into the mobile devices. In the case of the expense, allows you to do offline entry, take pictures of receipts on the fly, automatically attach them to the lines of your expense reports, and expedite that entry process. So we'll get an opportunity to see how that works also. But for now, I want to switch over to the core application and take us through some of the key features and functionality and talk a little bit about the core interface itself. So the screen you're looking at right now, this is the primary login screen. This is where everyone accesses the system initially. Now, I'm utilizing Chrome. I'm also going to be utilizing Internet Explorer. WorkPlace is officially supported on Safari and Firefox in addition to those other two. And as a result, it's very accessible. You can run it on a PC, on a Mac, and a lot of the leading tablets that are out there, your iPads, Droid Galaxies, and things along those lines, since they are running those comparable browsers on them. From a login perspective, have a separate username and password like we're doing here. Integrate into your network credentials. In WorkPlace 2015, which is being released here shortly, we're also deploying true single sign-on. So if you want to use a Windows Live account or Office 365 account or something along those lines, you can also deploy the authentication in that mode. Now, the application, as I mentioned in the beginning, is really designed for employees, individuals that are going to be touching a financial transaction in some way, but are most likely not in the finance and accounting group itself. So one of the things that we always have to be very careful of is not putting a full finance and accounting system in front of the individuals and making it a very focused experience. And we do that right from the get-go. So I'm going to log in as an employee, someone that is going to maybe submit an expense report, needs to submit a requisition for a request, needs to submit a timesheet, needs to maybe has an invoice that they want to get processed. What is their experience like? Well, when someone logs in, the first thing they're met with is a dashboard, their personal dashboard. The areas of the system they have access to are over here on the left-hand side. You don't have access, you don't see it. Announcement capabilities, which are specific to that user. Catalog capabilities, which are specific to the requisition process and that user. And then over here on the right-hand side, where are my outstanding transactions and their current status in real time? So from this single screen, I can see my invoices, my requisitions, my timesheets, my expense sheets. You only have one of these areas, that's fine. That's all that you would see in this view. As part of that, seeing the current status for each of these. You know, certainly that's one of the most important things that a lot of people want to know when they have something in an approval process. Where is it? They can actually log into the dashboard, see in real time where that approval is in the queue. Who is it currently sitting with? In this case here, my demonstration approver. number of different user preferences, which we'll touch on as we go through a little bit. And then if I go down to the requisition area here, go into the main requisition screen itself, I can go into start a transaction. Now for the session here today, what I'm going to do is we're going to start on the procurement side of things, on the requisition side of things, and get that, push that through. As part of that, we're going to look at the approvals. We're going to spend a little bit more time on approvals than we would in, say, the expense area, because once you know approvals in one area, you actually know them in all the areas. Now, for those of you not familiar with what a requisition is or how it may be beneficial to your organization, this is your definition of spend control. Controlling and getting approval for a purchase before it happens. There's a lot of emphasis out in the marketplace on invoice automation, getting approvals related to invoices. And we actually offer functionality along those lines for certain situations. But what is really going to control your spending is not getting approval on an invoice that's already there once you have the liability, but actually facilitating, expediting a request process that has approvals beforehand and then having the invoice ultimately match back to that request. And that is where the WorkPlace emphasis is. I'm going to go into the requisition entry screen here for a moment. I'm going to go into a blank screen and just talk a little bit about the interface. The screen you're looking at right now, this is our main requisition entry screen. When we get to expense, it's actually going to look very similar, only it's going to have fewer fields on it. It's actually in some different pieces of information because it's an expense report. You know, same with check request, invoice match. You know, timesheets has some slight variances because of the type of transaction it is, but has a very similar look and feel again. Now, within the application, as I mentioned, you're going to be deploying this type of a transaction to people that are not necessarily familiar with Dynamics GP. Maybe they don't even know what Dynamics GP is. They just know they need to get a request. So the system itself can boil this down, bake it down to the minimum level of information. So if you want to take it down to the level of, I need this and I need 10 of these, that is the minimum piece of information the system will force someone to enter. Description and a quantity. Now, as part of that, I may want to put some other information in here, and you'll see down below there's some additional fields. Now, these additional fields down here, these are actually specific to each line. So if I want to assign a vendor to 5 different vendors to 5 different lines, it will actually automatically create 5 different POs. It's a true requisition system. As you can imagine, when I go into any area of the system here, and I have a saved search that's going on, this is a real-time view into your Dynamics GP vendor list. You add a new vendor, hit save, it's instantly in this list. As are your address IDs, the additional addresses, any items or inventory, your shipping addresses, bill to addresses, your chart of accounts, shipping methods, vendor items, manufacturing items, inventory locations, currency codes, unit of measures, pretty much all the core financial information that you have in Dynamics GP is available here. Now, in a lot of cases, that might actually be too much information to put in front of people. So one of the configuration options, and I use that word very carefully, of configuration, which means that you can change it. You don't need a developer. It's not a customization, but something that you can actually change. One of the configuration options that is available is the ability to change the screen for different groups of users or even different users themselves. So maybe we want to hide a certain field or make it read-only or mark it as required or default information or limit the values that come up in the drop-down. Just to illustrate that, just while I was speaking, I just changed the layout for this particular user. So now if I come in, just hit refresh on my browser, if you watch down at the bottom, a number of the fields just went away. They're still there. They're still being populated behind the scenes, even though they might be hidden. But I've now removed them from the view. So I've simplified this view. So you can do these types of changes yourself as part of configuration. Now, I'm going to put the setting back here for a moment just for our demonstration and talk a little bit about how to complete a requisition. Because controlling the interface, minimizing the interface, making a very streamlined interface, that's half the battle. The other half of the battle is expediting the entry process, minimizing the amount of time people need to be sitting here inputting information into the system. You know, these types of transactions are not the ones that individuals wake up in the morning and get all excited about that they get to go enter in a requisition. You know, these are processes that you need to make them as user-friendly as possible, as many tools as possible in order to expedite that entry process. So we provide a few tools as part of that. One of those tools include duplication. So you pull up our requisition from last week, duplicate a line. We have template capabilities. We call it a shopping list. So you can go in, bring up a pre-built list that you have, inventory, non-inventory, services related, doesn't really matter, but a standardized list. You can have as many different ones as you want. Out of that list, say which items you want to get for today. Click load, and it brings those lines into the requisition. In addition, it can default in a number of other elements or pieces of information as part of that entry process. So you don't have to key in the preferred vendor or the account code or things along those lines. Catalog capabilities. Maybe you want to deploy a more online retail type of experience. This is an internal catalog. It is built into the application itself. Deploy it. Don't deploy it. It's entirely up to you. It comes with that core product. But with this interface, it allows you to do a keyword search, pull up related items, build a shopping cart instead of using that full entry screen. And at the end of that, you can either add it to an existing requisition, or you can actually have it create a new requisition and submit it right from the shopping cart. Punch-out capabilities. Once again, these are the definitions of a best-of-breed application. So the ability to go to a supplier such as Office Depot, connect directly to that vendor's website. When it connects, it logs me in. So it has my organizational credentials passed through. So now when I'm shopping this site, it's showing me my contracted items, my contracted prices. Build a shopping cart as normal. When you're done, check out, and it will bring that shopping cart into the requisition. You'll also default the vendor, the price, the unit of measure, the vendor item, and other pieces of information, relevant pieces of information. This is the punch-out standard. This is an international standard. It is not something that we developed. Office Depot or any other supplier does not need to know who we are. It is something that you simply hook up. Now, as part of this, once again, if I want to go and put a different account code in, I certainly can do that at any point. The full search criteria is throughout the application. There's also budget checking built in, certainly as part of that requisition process. You may want to enforce a budget. There are a number of different budget engines that are either built into Dynamics GP or exclusive to WorkPlace that are supported. There are 6 different budget engines that can potentially be deployed within a WorkPlace deployment. You can even combine some of them so they're being evaluated at the same time. And that's ranging from financial to vendor level budgets to ad hoc budgets to project level budgets. We also have attachments. Do attachments at the header, at the line level, comments at the header, at the line level. But when it comes to that requisition, as I mentioned, expedite that entry process, default in as much information as you can based off of who someone is and what they've entered. And when you're done, take that requisition, submit it, and have it automatically go through routing and approval. There's my warning saying I'm going over budget. Yes, I still want to submit. Now, when it comes to the types of transactions we're talking about, requisitions, expense sheets, time sheets, invoices, all of these tend to have an approval requirement associated with them, an auditable approval requirement. A approval requirement that means that you cannot manipulate the matrix. So as part of the core application, it's certainly built around this foundation, is there is an entire routing rule workflow engine underlying all of this. Now this is a very strong engine, it's a very mature engine. So it allows you to do approvals according to your organization, your approval matrix. So if you want to do the approval based off of the total requisition and what department it is, and it goes to this department head, for example, no problem. You want to do it at the line level. So if this line is over a certain dollar amount, it needs to go to these individuals, you can do that. In fact, each line on this requisition can potentially go to a completely different set of approvers based off of who submits it and what they enter. You can have unlimited approval levels. And as that former customer, you know, and being able to have those configuration capabilities, certainly an important element is including all the options in the approval matrix itself. So all of the key fields ranging from, once again, the department to the item code to the vendor to the chart of accounts to a section of the chart of accounts, the priority, the shipping method, all of these fields are eligible options to configure your workflow, more than what any one organization will need. But they're there in case you ever do. Now, when something gets submitted for approval, it's going to show up in my outstanding transaction list. I have a separate setting turned on for this situation, which is actually even providing me a summary total by vendor for that requisition. So I can see at a quick glance each of the vendors that's being requested. Maybe you have lines that have no vendor assigned to them. I can also see who I'm waiting for. In this case here, it's my demonstration approver. That's who is, needs to take a look at this. And if I actually log out as that employee, I log in as my approver, you'll see my dashboard just changed here, but most importantly, I have this to-do section, and it's telling me I have 7 different lines that are currently waiting for approval. Now, a key element for the approval is not relying on individuals to just magically log into the system and see if they have something they need to approve. They're not going to do it, or at least the majority of individuals are not going to do that. So built into the overall process that can be incorporated at multiple instances is email notifications. So each time you have something you need to approve, you're going to receive an email. In that email, you'll have a hyperlink back to the system. Click on this, it takes you into the approval areas of the system. You have the details of that particular transaction: requisition, expense sheet, timesheet, invoice, check request, all operates the exact same way. Then in the event that the information that is being provided to you here is sufficient for you to make a decision, instead of logging into the system, you can just take that email you just received, hit reply, and then either for every line or maybe one of the lines or some of the lines, indicate whether or not you approve or disapprove, hit send. You don't even need to go into the application. Your approval is done. Email approval. Now, since this is email, since this is text-based, as long as you have a device that allows you to reply to an email and edit that reply, you can approve within WorkPlace. It does not matter what that device is. So that's going to cover pretty much every phone that is out there. Now, of course, in some instances, you may want to see additional information related to that line, or look at things in more detail, or look at the budget details themselves, or anything along those lines. And that's when you can do the approval also within the application itself. When you're doing an approval in here, there's mass update operations. So I can do approve all, for example, here. But even though I did approve all, I can wait on a line if I want. I can disapprove a particular line. Business rules will kick in constantly. In this case here, it's forcing me to give a reason why you're disapproving. I need more information. You can also have standardized reasons why you disapprove. Once you've done that, simply hit process, and the approval mechanism's done. So those lines I approved will either go to a fully approved state or go to the next person in the sequence. That disapproved line is going to go back to my requester. The line that's on hold is going to stay in my queue. Now, one of the questions that comes up when it comes to approval is, What if I'm not available? What do we do then? So I'm on vacation. I'm just tied up. How do I handle that? So built into the approval mechanism, there's this concept called alternates. So in order to actually retain your control and compliance itself, is we don't allow anyone to just assign a backup approver on the fly, because you can't really control who that is. What we do allow, though, is for those backup approvers to be defined with the main approver, saying, for this person, in this situation, even if you want to get to that level of detail, here's the backup. Then I, as a primary approver, if I'm not going to be available, I can just come into my user preferences. I can activate my alternates. I can schedule my alternates. The system administrator can turn on your alternates. And when those alternates are active, those email notifications, those pending approvals, will actually also be sitting with your alternates. So it'll help keep things moving. There's other devices like auto escalation and reminder emails and things along those lines. So a number of things to help keep that approval flow moving forward. Now, if we log out for a moment, log back in as our original employee and just sort of see where things are, I'm going to see here's my requisition we just did, number 63. I now have one line disapproved, one line waiting for approval, and 4 lines that are fully approved. Drill into it. I can see which line is which. I have my disapproved line here, my still an approval line here. If I go into the details for the disapproved line, I can see who disapproved it and when, and the reason they disapproved it. This directly matches up with the email I received telling me that it was disapproved and why. A separate email telling me that these 4 lines are fully approved. And then in the event that you're running centralized purchasing, you can actually have an email go to purchasing saying these 4 lines are approved. They're now eligible for a purchase order. You can also operate in a decentralized purchasing mode. So in this scenario, these lines can actually have different destinies. So lines 2, 3, 4, and 6 are moving ahead in the process. Well, we can actually generate a purchase order where lines 1 and 5 are currently still being processed. Now, when you do have those fully approved lines, your next stop is to actually issue the purchase order. So I'm going to log in under a role called a reviewer. This is anyone in the organization. The only thing that is key is that they have the authority to issue a purchase order to a vendor, because this is what's going to happen on this particular step. As that reviewer, I also have a to-do. In this case here, it's telling me I have 4 lines outstanding. So these are 4 fully approved lines that are eligible for a PO. If I pull up my to-do, some filter criteria. Maybe I only want to process the requisition lines for a particular vendor or a particular priority or a particular department. I can also pull up everything on the screen. When you load it, it will bring in all the outstanding requisitions that meet that criteria. And as you can see, it looks very similar to the approval screen. In here, I can once again evaluate the individual areas perhaps. I can potentially make changes. You can provide thresholds at this purchasing stage to actually even modify the price. You exceed the threshold, it resubmits it for approval. But at this purchasing stage, all you need to do is indicate that you want to order something, or maybe the individual lines. Hit process. The system will then do a safety check and make sure that you're not exceeding, missing any key information or anything along those lines. If everything is complete, it will issue those purchase orders. So in this case here, I issued 2 POs. The first one is just to my standard vendor, who is set up to automatically receive a copy of that PO. So it's already emailed that purchase order to the vendor. My second line here is my punch-out vendor, Office Depot. It's already transmitted that purchase order to Office Depot through that punch-out standard. So in this scenario, I don't have to do anything else. Both my vendors have their purchase orders. And just to see a copy of that, if I come back to my email, an example of what the vendor can receive, you can put full HTML components in here, images, text, colors, anything along those lines. and then of course you have a copy of the purchase order itself. Now, as part of that, when we create those purchase orders, we're creating them over in Dynamics GP for you. You don't have to. You know, there is a model where you can actually skip over the Dynamics GP purchasing and continue it in WorkPlace all the way through to the voucher. Many instances, especially people running procurement already, they're going to have that PO be generated over in Dynamics GP. That is the Dynamics GP purchase order sequencing that you're seeing there. Those purchase orders are created in real time. Now, that process is your spend control. That is your requisition process. Now, after the purchase order is created, there are a couple options that you can utilize. They are optional areas, optional features or functionality or modules within the WorkPlace solution set to expand beyond that requisition process. One of those optional areas is receiving. So if you are doing a dedicated receiving step, you can actually, sorry, I have this under my employee. You can provide security access with the receiving module to allow people to actually log into WorkPlace and do receiving against those GP purchase orders from WorkPlace. Now, this is typically done through a receiving wizard where you might go in, you might pull up lines from a given vendor, a given purchase order number, or things along those lines. When you load things into the line itself, you simply indicate which lines you want to receive, confirm the quantity itself. Once you're done, hit process, and you've now sent a receipt back to Dynamics GP. There's the receipt information itself, the transaction information, Dynamics GP. Very straightforward. We also have an extended interface for invoices if you like. So when you get that invoice in, you can log in under a role that allows for invoicing. As part of that, you can actually match an invoice within WorkPlace that will create a shipment invoice over in Dynamics GP. Now you may be asking, well, why do I want to do that? I'm already using the shipment invoice within Dynamics GP. Why would I want to go to a different interface? And the main reason, really the primary reason for that, assuming you're in a centralized AP situation, is the fact that if there is a problem with that invoice, you're probably going to want approvals. So the approval workflows that we saw on the requisition side are built into the invoice match. The only difference is when you're dealing with the invoice match, you're typically dealing with variances of some sort. So I'm going to pull in a line here, purchase order line. I'm going to put in my quantity and my unit price from the invoice itself. I can keep bringing in additional purchase order lines. I might want to attach a copy of the invoice itself. Once I have that in, I'm going to submit this. When I submit it, WorkPlace will evaluate as to whether or not that invoice actually matches the receipt and matches the purchase order. If it does, it's just going to send it over to and create a shipment invoice. If it doesn't, it's going to automatically submit it back through approval workflow so someone else can go and verify that that invoice is okay to pay. Now, outside of the workflow, why else might you want to use the invoice match within WorkPlace itself? There is extended interfaces under that AP invoice automation. There's actually even a vendor portal where vendors can log on, see their outstanding purchase orders that they've sent to you, and they can submit invoices. You essentially outsource your data entry effort to your vendors. Vendor is a centralized vendor portal. So other types of benefits of using the invoice match. Optional items. The key in that suite at the end of the day is the requisition. That is your spend control. There is more ways than to do requisition wrong than there is right. We've been doing this for a very long time, and our feedback comes from our customers, comes from our partners. One of the reasons I joined the organization as a customer is the fact that I had a great relationship as a customer, sorry, as joined as an employee, I had a great relationship as a customer with the organization. got to contribute directly into the product. So that's the entire procurement cycle. Michael, I will pause here real quick before I move into some of the other areas to see if there's any immediate questions on the procurement side.
All right, I'm not seeing any in the chat. Let me go ahead and unmute everyone just to see if everyone should be unmuted if there are any questions. Okay, not hearing any. We'll go ahead and...
Michael, actually, we've got a quick question.
You're not allowed, Joe.
What's that?
You're not allowed.
I'm not allowed. Come on.
That's what David told me.
I'll call you afterwards, Joe.
Yeah, much appreciated. Hey, can we set up approval routings based on project codes?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm assuming you mean project accounting?
Well, we track all of our project codes in analytical accounting.
Okay.
And what we'd want to do is if somebody's purchasing supplies for a particular project that's set up in analytical accounting, we'd want that to maybe bounce over to the project manager so they can see it and approve it and say, yeah, I'm willing to buy this for my project type of thing.
Yes. So we do offer the analytical accounting integration, and as part of that, any of the dimensions you set up within analytical accounting are incorporated into the approval workflow engine.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Well, why don't we move on to, Michael, some of the other areas here. I do want to switch gears a little bit and move over into the expense reimbursement.
All right.
Now, this is
Give me
another...
1 second here, and I'll mute everyone. Okay, and you should have, you should be back there, David.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to expense reports, expense reimbursement. This is another sort of hot topic. You know, if you go to any industry events, or I'm sure you get email notifications or things along those lines about expense reports. And, you know, as part of the expense reports, the solution within WorkPlace has two focuses. One is providing that best-of-breed interface, so having the functionality. I'm going to show you some of that when we go through. And then two, which is once again very important, but it can be easily overlooked, is an integration back into Dynamics GP. And this is going to have a financial impact, these expense reports, in some fashion. No matter how you process them, they are going to have an impact at some point. Now, when you're talking about expense reports, the starting point is actually not the app itself, or sorry, the application itself. It is the app that you're seeing in front of you here. This is the dedicated app. This is what it looks like on your iPhone, on your Droid phone, on your BlackBerry running that Google emulator. It is designed to serve as a quick capture device for your expense sheets. I'm going to talk about time sheets in a moment. So whenever I have an expense, what I can do is actually just open the app on my phone, tap on Capture New Expense, go into the expense type. I have a type to search field here. So as I start typing, it'll start filling in the rest of the phrase for me, so I can pick that. Expense type is a very critical field. The date, you might want a description, you might want an amount, a currency perhaps, but then you'll tap on Attach, tap on Take Photo, which will open the camera on the device, take the picture, attach it to the line. You got multiple receipts, just take multiple pictures. If you took pictures previously, select it from your camera roll, attach it to those lines. Once you're done, add a new expense, just go to a new blank form, send it in, whatever you need to do. When you do that, it's going to send it into WorkPlace itself, so then you can build an expense report, and I'm going to show that for you in a moment. Now, we had a question a moment ago, and it was asking about project. Now, in that scenario, project was being part of analytical accounting, but some of you may actually have project accounting. That is also supported in this interface. So if I go over to my settings here, I'm going to just change where I am pointed. So I'm going to point to a different WorkPlace install. I'm going to connect to that different WorkPlace install, which is a project accounting WorkPlace install with Dynamics GP Project Accounting. So now I have expense still, but now I also have time. But if I go into the expense, I now have the project and cost category, project accounting fields. So this is a dynamic interface, even though it is an actual app that you can install on the device. All right. So that is the quick capture on the mobile device. Now, as part of expense reports, some of you may also have a corporate credit card program deployed within the organization. So as part of those corporate credit card transactions, you can import those once a week or what have you. So then those are also available within the expense process. Ultimately, the key action here is actually to go and build and submit an expense report. This is something I have to do internally. Certainly, we came back from Convergence about a month ago or so down in Atlanta. So, of course, every time we travel, we have our own expense reports. I use the mobile app along the way. Then, when I'm actually going to submit my expense report, here's my actions. I go to expense. I go into expense entry. As you can see, it has a very similar look and feel to Requisition, only some slightly different fields. I can then go up to select expenses. This is going to show me my mobile lines, my corporate credit card lines. So now I can actually bring in a couple mobile lines, which have the receipts associated with them. There's a receipt for the first line, receipt from the second line, pictures right from my iPhone. I can also merge the receipt from this mobile line to this corporate credit card line. Number one challenge with corporate credit card programs, getting copies of the receipts. This allows you to merge those lines. I may also have had a mileage line along reimbursement. So I'm going to choose my mileage expense type, which will default in my reimbursement rate. Then I can go into this little map icon here, opens up Google Maps, and it's going to default to my starting address, which happens to be our corporate office. And I can go in and I can type in, I want to go to the Detroit airport, for example. Calculate that route, and it'll actually build the route for me. I can have 25 different waypoints, recent addresses, saved addresses to put in that mileage reimbursement. Once you're done with your routes, put that in, take your expense sheet, submit it, and you're done. I didn't have to enter in anything. It's coming from my corporate credit card, my mobile lines, and my Google Map integration. Now, there's a couple other capabilities which are a little more expense specific. These are optional components. Things like questionnaires. So based off the fact that this is a restaurant, you can actually force people to answer additional information about that particular expense because it's a restaurant. So how many people attended the meal? 1. Who was it? Just me. Which meal of the day was it? I put in my own custom dropdown or configurable dropdown. It was lunch, save and close. Maybe you want to take something like a hotel charge and split that charge across multiple different components. So maybe you need to split out the meals or split out the phone or the internet or something along those lines. You can take that single receipt, that single hotel line, and split it across those multiple charges. This split window will actually keep track of what the original amount was, how much you selected, what is remaining. So you can't, it will reconcile it, force it, so then you make sure that you split it correctly, opposed to just splitting it on the front end here, which then forces an error at some point. Once again, analytical accounting integration, project integration, the GL distributions is where it allows you to take a single line and allocate that line across multiple account codes, also available on the procurement side of things. But just like on the procurement side, once you have the information in, you'll take that transaction, you'll submit it, it will automatically go through routing and approval, back and forth. This line's disapproved, this line is not, so on and so forth. Email notifications going on. Once again, informing someone that they have something they need to approve with the information. In this case here, I've even turned on receipts view. So when I send out the email, you can even attach copies of the receipts in the email itself if you want. Eventually, you'll have a fully approved expense sheet. You take that expense sheet, you'll batch process them over into accounts payable. The approval mechanism itself, as I mentioned, is identical to the requisition side, with the exception of it has some slightly different information on it and certainly has a tendency to have a heavier reliance on the receipts themselves. Expense reports. Now, in our remaining time here, I'm going to cover two more areas that are completely separate processes, starting with the check request. Now, you may be looking at that initial procurement process and going either, A, we don't issue purchase orders in some instances, or B, I never issue purchase orders. I don't want a requisition. You know, I do want to actually just have that situation where I have an invoice that's in, I want to quickly get it in, I want to route for approval, I want to get over to AP. There is a dedicated process for that situation called check request. So in here, if I go into check request entry, I once again have a dedicated interface. This is designed to capture a single invoice. It operates in a fairly similar function. But as we saw in the other areas, there's capabilities that are specific to this. So one of those capabilities is you can actually scan invoices in advance into a user-defined or an overall organizationally defined directory. WorkPlace will monitor that directory. If you go into the select expenses, it will show you everything that's outstanding. I can then bring in one of those invoices and bring it into the interface, bring it into the screen. It will remove it from that directory. If I delete this transaction, we'll put it back. And now that I have this here, I can quickly code this accordingly. So pick my vendor, once again, put in my invoice number, any services I may need to do, the amount, take that transaction, submit it. Now, you may also want the chart of account. You could have this defaulted once again off of the vendor, off of some other mechanism. You can also move it to the front screen. Once you put in that chart of account, take that check request, submit it, and just like, oh, you see I have a budget issue again, goes through routing and approval, just like we saw with the requisition, just like we saw with the expense. So as you can see, once you know one area and how that operates, you very easily know the other. So even though only one function here, one process may be of a value to you, if you have a need down the road, it's easy to plug in the additional components. Lastly, for any project accounting users that are on the call, there is also a timesheet interface. This is one that is near and dear to my heart in particular, because this is what I was a customer of. So for time, works very similar. You have that mobile app capability, and then within the timesheet itself, you have your timesheet entry. Now, in the case of timesheet, it is a little bit of a different look and feel just because of the type of transaction it is. But the timesheets themselves are directly linked back into project accounting. You can align your periods with project accounting, enter time into the individual fields. You can have configurable periods. You can have longer periods if you want, 2 weeks long, a month long, anything along those lines. You can put comments down at the line level here. You only need to enter in that project and cost category combination once, though, for the period. So it's a very expedited entry process. Put in those lines. Maybe duplicate last week's timesheet. Certainly a very popular feature with timesheet users. Enter in those hours. Submit that timesheet. Once again, goes to the project managers, goes to the line supervisors, whoever that might be. At the end of that batch process, and it will end it up over in project accounting. That's your timesheet functionality. So to summarize here, what we've covered is 4 primary areas: requisitions, expense reports, invoices, and timesheets. Deploy one of them, deploy all of them, some of them. They are designed to expedite the entry process, expedite the approval process, and get it over into Dynamics GP right the first time. Michael?
Thank you, David. One of the other things you were mentioning before about why people might, do the receivings or the invoice matching in WorkPlace versus GP is also cost, user cost. And I know you guys don't like to typically bring that up, but it's important for the people on the phone or the people who are going to view this later to know that the cost of a Paramount WorkPlace user is a lot less than a full user within GP. So if the AP person is only putting in invoices, then we can keep some of that cost down by allowing them to be a user in WorkPlace and keep the cost down that way. I'm not seeing any other questions on here. I'll go ahead and open the session up real quick. I'll unmute everyone. Any questions out there from any of the attendees right now? I also know we have another, one of our attendees is also from Paramount. I don't know if Beth, if you're still out there, if you want to just say hello.
Hello, and thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. We really appreciate that, and also appreciate the time that Paradigm has put in to get this together. So thank you, everyone, for attending.
All right. Any other questions? Well, with that, it looks like we stayed right within that hour frame, so thank you very much for that, David. If there are any other questions, or if anyone wants to see some more detail, please let us know. We can certainly set up a more in-depth demonstration, one-on-one discussions, and take you through any of the questions and any of your needs. So again, I thank you all for coming out today, spending the time with us. Thank you, David, for giving us a nice, thorough presentation, and have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Mike.